Hello, and welcome to Growth Talks podcast. It's a place where you can find tools, advice, suggestions, ideas, and so much more on personal and professional growth coming from different experts in these areas. My name is Snezhana. I'm your host for today, but I'm also an executive coach and a leadership trainer. It is a pleasure to introduce my guest for today. I'll let her do her piece, but Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to come here. I know we've officially met on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just, I think it's so funny how world is a small place when you have networks like this. So before we start with our topic for today, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Megan, and I am co-founder of a small digital marketing agency. We're called Formada Social. We've been around since 2017. There are 8 full-time employees, and we're what I would call like a growth marketing agency.
Hmm.
Most of the time, our clients come to us because they have really specific growth goals. They already have those defined, but they don't necessarily know what actions they can put behind those goals in order to see real results. So it's our team's job to come in, first understand those goals with the prospective client, and then to build a custom plan to support those goals. And then we track them and really form relationships, deep relationships with our clients while we work to achieve them.
That sounds great. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much. So now, if you belong to one of these categories and you need help, Megan is here, but we will talk a little bit later how they can contact you if somebody's interested in
Okay. Sounds
getting
good.
more in touch. So our topic for today, even though you are the owner of a marketing agency, our topic is not going to be marketing but more of a your story. So, how you decided to build your own business, how that went, what you had to go through to get to where you are today. So, my first question really is, how did you decide to start your business?
Yeah. I mean, I have always been how do I want I've always been somebody who had a hard time with rules. If
Mhm.
I'm being super honest, like I
Okay.
was never I would always go into an organization and kind of figure out like, all right, what are the rules that I absolutely have to abide by, and where can I maybe have a little bit of wiggle room? So I've always kind of had that personality where like no was never really uh, no was when I heard no from someone, it was usually a signal to me that I needed to just try a little bit harder. There was a yes in there somewhere. So I think, part
Maybe you
of
should have gone for sales rather than marketing.
I started in sales. Yeah, like I think, I think everyone who's going to start a business should start in face-to-face sales. If
Mm,
you have to sell someone something face to face, I think that's the first skill that you would need in order to successfully launch a business. And so,
okay.
yeah, I started in sales. But to answer your question about like when did I decide that I was going to start a business, I think it was probably like in my last job. I worked at a startup. I was
Mhm.
there for nearly 10 years, and I was given a lot of autonomy to build within that startup and then like see the results of what I was building. And, I think they call that like an intrapreneur where you're like building within
Yeah.
somebody else's ecosystem. And I learned a lot there. I learned a lot
Oh, I can
about,
imagine.
yeah, like what I liked to do, like what I also experienced a little bit of corporate red tape and like thought of things like, oh, if I were the boss, I wouldn't do this. And so I think I cut my teeth inside somebody else's business. In fact, I,
Mhm.
I know that I did that, and it gave me a lot of confidence to do my own thing.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like it was it an easy transition then, given that you had so much autonomy to going from being an employee, even though you did have a lot of freedom to experiment and move around, to starting your own thing.
Yeah, I egotistically in the early days thought it would be an easy transition. I was like, oh, I built this thing inside of somebody else's business. I can just take that and do it on my own. It is such a gift to be able to build inside somebody else's business. Like the number one thing is I wasn't responsible for payroll. So
Mm.
if you're building inside somebody else's business, you can just focus on the operations of
Mhm.
building the thing. You're not like financially responsible if it doesn't work. So was it an easy transition? Like, no, no. Like I had a lot to learn. I made a lot of mistakes, and like there's no like guidebook for like this is how you launch a business, or at least
Right.
in from my experience, there wasn't really a clear path to follow. I
Mm.
even from just like setting up a business in terms of like all of the legal aspects
Hmm.
of setting up a business, I had so many blind spots there. And then there's also the more like emotional part of learning how like one of the things I struggled with was when you are launching a business, nobody is going to tell you like these are our corporate guidelines. You create those. So
Right.
I struggled when I was just able to say anything I wanted to say with no red tape. Like, what did I want to say? And so I was
Mm.
the for a long time. In the
Okay.
early days of my business, I really focused on more like the corporate identity, like what are the thing like logo, colors, your style guide. And I didn't put myself at the face of the business because I was scared and I didn't know how, and I didn't want to humiliate myself, I guess. I didn't want criticism. I was like too fragile for that at that point, I think.
Right. I do think, but I do think it is what you mentioned, I guess the face, the logo, the operations. I think that we lean into that because it's familiar.
Yeah,
And usually when we think of a business, first thing we think of is, okay, how is it run in the sense of, do they have a team? What is their process like? What are their services? So I think it's very natural that we focus on those aspects first,
yeah,
without thinking much about actually, hang on, who am I in this business?
yeah,
And what is my vision? I think when I started my business, I was thinking, wait, hang on, I need to have a vision, even though it's a solopreneurship, but I need to know, in an ideal world, what it is that I would love to see as my legacy. I don't know
yeah.
if it was the same thing for you.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have a co-founder, which was really helpful. So
Mm.
I did not launch this thing on my own, and I couldn't have, just from a just basic skill set. Like we work in a very like I don't have the technology skill set
Uh-huh.
that my co-founder does. So I could have never launched an agency without somebody who has that skill set. But I I think what I needed is like a as a human, as a CEO, as a founder, is I needed to figure out like who am I guess like I just said, like without any like corporate guidelines, what do I stand for? And
Mm.
what does success look like for me professionally? And what are my non-negotiables? Like, what are some things that I am just like completely unwilling to do because they don't align with my morals and ethics? And so you kind of go through at least for me, I couldn't define that specifically early on. I took a
Right.
lot of I took a lot of jobs that maybe weren't like the right fit in the earliest days, and then over time you're like, oh, this is actually where I'm good. This is where I really don't want to spend my time or energy or focus.
Right. How did you go about it? I'm sure it wasn't one particular thing, but what helped you through that transition? It sounds like it's a little bit of a mindset shift,
Yeah,
in addition
yeah,
to just your human growth.
yeah. I mean, I think floundering for a long time, just like feel like a feeling of like discomfort eventually motivated me to find other entrepreneurs who were like 10 steps ahead of me.
Okay.
I think that's what really put some momentum behind my personal, professional development and kind of getting more comfortable sharing who I am professionally with like a larger audience was
Hmm.
going to these people who had already been successful there and being asking those people. It felt really vulnerable to be like, hey, somebody that I admire and find aspirational. Are you open to having coffee with me, who hasn't built anything that is, necessarily anything that I can be proud of yet, So a big part of my growth was finding other people who had gone where I want to eventually go and asking them, how'd you get there?
Okay. Well, that's, I mean, that's great. I think having that kind of mentorship, non-official mentorship or informal mentorship really helps. So creating that support system for us
Yeah.
as we grow.
Yes. Yeah, and one of the things that I found, like, I think you see a lot of that, like, mentorship in, like, social media posts, LinkedIn, but you don't necessarily see the more fragile side of the growth. People are usually sharing success stories, but not
Right.
like, when are the times that you almost quit? Like, tell me about the times that you were waking up at 3 in the morning and you were just like cycling through all the things that could go wrong. Like, how did you make it through that? Tell me about a time when you needed to pull from your personal finances to make your payroll. And like,
Mm,
and what did that feel like? Did you have that experience? What did that feel like? What kept you going when you almost couldn't any longer? Like, those are the things that I think are often absent from a lot of the, like, social stuff. And if you can meet a mentor in person and ask those questions, it can be so just comforting and validating to hear that, yeah, like, these super successful people that have gone before you have struggled with so many of the same things.
yeah. Were people willing to share when you would ask them?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I have met
great.
some really wonderful mentors, and I have two, a woman and a man. They're, much more success. One is a client, one is somebody that I've met at the gym. And,
Okay.
it's just incredibly helpful to pull from their experience. And, I also think that, you know, I think you have to find the right mentor. I guess I do feel like I was kind of lucky because I was able to identify two people that I was interested in, and those
Mm,
relationships just work, and I've been meeting with them regularly for the last 4 years. But if somebody isn't willing to share, that just means that you chose the wrong person. Or maybe they're a little bit more private, or maybe they're not in a place in their life where they can extend that type of energy on, a mentee. And I wouldn't make that I wouldn't take that as an indication that, you're not worthy of that.
right. I was going to ask, do you have any tips or advice how to go about finding the people who could be potential mentors?
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Like, I, this is gonna, like, I guess my two mentors, that one of them, like I mentioned, was somebody that I just met in the gym. And I lift heavy weights 3 times a week in, like, in a private gym.
Hmm.
So most of the people that can be in there during the day, like, paying for personal training, are pretty successful people just by nature. So I could overhear some of these conversations, and this was a man that I could tell had been very successful professionally, was now retired. I knew that he was on an angel fund and an investor fund. So I knew that he was really business focused and also focused on kind of emerging entrepreneurs. So I knew that he already had, like, I would look for people who are already kind of living in that environment, and then
Okay.
show some interest in them. Ask them if they'll meet you for coffee. Another, the woman who is my mentor is a client, and somebody that I really admire the way that she shows up for her team. So, that was just a kind of a natural, like, asking her if she would share her story with me.
Mm.
And m- meeting for coffee or drinks is just a really, like, I think meeting in an environment that's casual
Hmm.
is also a really great place to have these types of conversations, private and casual, right? Because you're asking this person to be vulnerable in a way that they might just not be able to be within, like, their corporate headquarters.
Right. Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, I'm curious about, I think most of us go transitioning from being an employee to having a business, unless you're starting your own business really, really early. So that's like the only thing you know. So you've been kind of an entrepreneur your entire life. Uh, have have you run into any challenges switching? So I know for me, there was a challenge of, 9 to 5. So what are my office hours? Do I have office hours? What are my boundaries and when I'm working, when I'm not working? So that was a big challenge for me in the mindset more than anything else. What are some of the things that you struggled with or you had to overcome as you were
Yeah.
transitioning to being a business
Yeah.
owner?
I don't know if mine were really like my struggle was really like business hours related. I would say it was, I mean, I was 39 when I quit my corporate job. And so I was very, very accustomed to my paycheck and to like work travel and to just the dynamics that I had built with my coworkers. And so those like deep relationships that I had with my peers at work, I didn't have peers any
Right.
longer. So there was nobody to be like, oh, this is a frustrating thing. Like let's go to happy hour and talk it out. Like if I'm frustrated, it's because I'm like frustrated with myself or my business partner, and we're not really going to complain about each other. Like so the network is gone. And then you are dialing, at least for me, I was dialing way back to zero from like a place where I was pretty comfortable with a salary that I had gotten to a place where, over the years I was able to afford a certain lifestyle. And
Right.
then suddenly that was just totally gone. And uh, I anticipated that, but it wasn't that I wanted all these like material displays of wealth. Like that the absence of that didn't bother me. But you do notice things like you have a social circle and suddenly you might not be able to participate in that in the same way because going on a girls' trip that requires lodging and a plane ticket is not really possible when you're making $0.
Right.
So like a lot of things, there's just like a lot of adjustments that need to take place.
How did you deal with that?
How did I deal with that? I've always been somebody that was really comfortable. Like, I guess even when I worked in a corporate environment, my car was 22 years old. So I've always been somebody who was really comfortable with just operating on a shoestring budget.
Hmm.
I don't know. I kind of like the puzzle of that. But in terms of like the social aspect of it and kind of needing to drop out of some of my social circles or just maybe do different things with some of my friends, I would be lying if I said it wasn't isolating. It was really isolating. And you kind of go, I think maybe every entrepreneur goes quiet for a little bit while they're just kind of figuring out like who am I in this new identity and what does it mean?
Right.
So like when you ask how do I deal with it, like I think I started by just being like really reducing the things that I was focusing on and strictly focusing on the business for a little while and just kind of accepting the loneliness that came with it.
Okay. Yeah, that can be a tough one. I've noticed, especially lately on social media, a lot of people talk about how isolating having a business can be, especially, in your case, you do have a partner, so there's a co-founder. So
Yes.
at least there's that. So there's the two of
Oh,
you.
yes.
If
Like I said, like I could not, um, I know that there are plenty of people who launch businesses successfully on their own. I could not be one of those people. I really needed, like I said, my coworker or excuse me, my co-founder and I have very different skill sets. So just from like a basic foundational level, I wouldn't have the skill set, but just having the partnership and sh sharing the stress, I think has
Yeah.
been and has brought us very close and our families very close. And you really start to realize just how deeply you trust that person when you are in a pretty vulnerable, like you've combined your livelihoods and you're taking care of your families together. And
Yeah.
so you really learn to trust that person through those experiences and through that vulnerability of it.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, but that's what I was sharing. It's a lot of people talk about how lonely it can be, especially if you're a solopreneur,
Yeah.
wearing all of the hats and trying to figure out how to go about it, what are the priorities, what are the necessities, and then how do you kind of balance them all out without burning out, ideally would be great.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
know a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, they burn out a lot because we were just not ready for everything that we need to take care of. Like you said, you weren't financially responsible when you were an employee, but with entrepreneurship, not only comes the financial responsibility, but also really you are your accountant, your your
Yeah.
assistant, your boss, your everybody. You have to do your own marketing. You have to figure out how to find clients, depending on what you do and what services you offer. But
Yeah.
it can be pretty exhausting, and then sometimes it's really hard to, even if you have friends and you have the family support, just talking to them sometimes is not enough because they don't understand. They're not going through that.
Exactly. And it's not their faults. It's
No,
not their
no.
fault. And sometimes a well-meaning person will say, "Hey, you could just get a job. You could always do," and I never want another job. I don't want a job. I want this to work. That this is, and so that's not a comforting thing to say, even though it's said with the intention of reminding you that there are
Yeah.
other options. It's, in my experience, like it just hasn't helped.
Yeah, one thing I kept hearing a lot as well was along the well-meaning lines is the you've got this, you've always been able to achieve whatever you set your mind to, and I know this is supposed to be encouraging, of course, because you see that the person believes in you. But at the
Yeah,
moment when you're hearing it, maybe it's more like, yeah, well, what if I fail? And so what if I don't actually make this happen? So
yeah.
what does that make me then?
Yeah. Yeah. And the truth is you will have all sorts of tiny failures along the way.
Right.
I think like, if there's anything that I've learned is that, over the last 7 years is some things won't work. And you will have all in failure is just it's just feedback. So anytime we try something and it doesn't work, that's feedback, that's data. And then
Right.
you log that and you don't do it again. But you're
Right.
gonna have all sorts of like I feel like I had a gazillion blind spot. I still do. I remember there was a period of time where I was like, I felt like things kept compounding, all these things kept happening where, how do I articulate this? Like, I guess the best I can give you an example. Like we were working with a startup that ended up dissolving,
Okay.
and they had paid for much of their marketing with one partner's personal credit card. And after the um, dilution of the business, they this guy charged everything back. He was using an Amex and he could charge everything back to me months later. He just disputed the charges. And it was tens of thousands of dollars. And it hit me 6 months later. Amex is now I only use Amex because I realized just how like well they support their clients. But I I realized like I'm vulnerable to things that I didn't even know could happen. I
Right.
didn't even know this could happen. And so you have this like feeling of like extreme exposure where you're like, I'm worried about a whole list of things. And then I'm worried about all the things that I don't even know are possibilities. And so there's just like this feeling of vulnerability that can make you feel really exposed and anxious. And
Mm,
eventually, over time, you build process around those things that you learn are pain points for you or blind spots or areas where you're vulnerable. But you also learn that like more things like that are coming. You're
mm,
there's more of that. Something like that will happen again, and I'll be
right.
okay.
Right. Does it get, because you have a little bit of experience now, does it get easier with time in the sense of maybe you know how to deal with things better, or you get more wisdom as you gain more
Yeah,
experience? So how does it go with time?
yeah, you said easier, and I like object to that word because it doesn't get easier. You just get better at dealing with the harshness. So
Mm,
I would say like no, I think honestly, as you grow in scale, it gets more complicated. You
mm,
have a lot more responsibilities. but your ability to navigate those things with a clear head, like that changes. It
Mm,
doesn't, the environment doesn't feel harsh any longer, and you start to almost enjoy the dynamic. I don't know how to best articulate this, but that harsh environment becomes enjoyable in some ways. You welcome it in a different way. It doesn't feel scary. It feels like a puzzle.
right. I guess maybe, the way I'm hearing what you're sharing is you get used to, so this is, instead of fighting it, you kind of go with it and then you learn how to navigate the environment rather
Yeah,
than, because usually, when we put up a fight, there's a lot more friction and then things just get a lot harder
yeah,
just because we're trying to push against something that's there, that's our reality.
yeah, yeah. I think that building a business has changed the way that I think of the word like fear. Like
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
think of like am I afraid because this is new? Because I've never done this and this is kind of like uncharted territory. If that's why I'm afraid, then that's kind of a silly fear. Like I've
Mm,
already signed up for growth and I want to scale my business to 10 million. And so I'm going to have to constantly be in places where I've never been before. So if I'm afraid of that, then I kind of have to rethink what my goals are. But if I'm feeling fear because I might be doing something that could ruin my reputation
uh-huh.
or um, potentially damage my client relationships in a way that I wouldn't be able to retain them, or I would be making an investment that could um, I don't know, like inhibit my ability to pay my team. Like that's a very different type of fear. And I want to listen to that in a
Right.
in a different way. So just like the way that I think about what I'm afraid of has changed. I'm not afraid of things that I haven't done before. That type of fear I can work through. But if it's like a fear that is arising because I might be damaging
Mm.
someone or something, I need to listen to that in a different way.
Right, right. What keeps you grounded, Megan? So I know it can be very overwhelming at times, be it something you're familiar with, but it's just too much, or something new that is just too much. What helps you stay grounded, when things like that hit you?
Yeah. I mentioned that like a routine. I think like I am by nature sort of a chaotic person. If I'm
Okay.
be like I'm the type of person that I will book the plane ticket and that's it. Like I'll figure out where we're gonna how we're gonna travel once we get there. So I kind of like um chaos. So I
Okay.
think just like I naturally have a high like I idle high anyway. But I think routine is definitely something that helps me with my anxiety.
Mm.
And I mentioned that, I met one of my mentors in the gym. I go to a trainer and I lift heavy weights Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for an hour every day. It's a non-negotiable. I never miss. And I do feel like there's this thing that happens where like I think they call it somatic processing, where like
Okay.
you're able to kind of move thoughts through your head by your own movement. And I can't speak super intelligently to any more than that, but I've heard my trainer say it. And I believe it. Like when I'm picking up something really heavy, I can't focus on anything else.
Right.
It's just
Right.
that. It's just like holding on to this weight. And so it's a reprieve for an hour, 3 days a week where my brain is focused solely on something else. And then I also think that, you know, when you decide that you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're like signing up for the fight of your life. Like this is going to be like the most intense fight that you have likely ever experienced. So you got to be really strong.
Mm.
And if you can get physically strong, that like physical representation of strength will extend into every area of your life. You can use it everywhere. And so I totally believe that if you're starting a business, one of the first things that you can do is get as strong physically as you possibly can. And then the same thing with like, I meet with a therapist, once a week and to talk about the things that are bothering me emotionally and to work through those things. And like I mentioned, I have mentors. And so I think just having those various support systems that
Right.
keep you healthy in lots of different ways are incredibly important.
Yeah, because you really covered all of it in the sense of emotional health, mental health, physical health. And I agree, I think physical activity for me that's a huge thing as well. It
Yeah.
really helps me process even when I was just an employee, let alone now, but having a space where you can just um de-stress and I love cardio because that helps. I feel like if I'm not sweating, I'm not doing a workout.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think, the whole process and I know it does induce the happiness hormone, so you feel more excited, you feel more energized after it. And of course, naturally that helps you move through certain issues and challenges. So I would agree with that. And also, yeah, investing in our mental and emotional health because it's a challenging journey. It's
Oh,
I would
yeah.
say very rewarding, but a very challenging one.
That yes, you really have to have a bunch of experts helping
Mm,
to keep you strong. I think I could not do it without that support. And you have to
yeah,
kind of seek it out on your own. It doesn't come to you. So you have to
yeah,
figure out like what does that support look like for me? It might be different for somebody else. What somebody
yeah.
else needs could be a totally different thing.
Absolutely. I have, for example, I have an accountability group, and that happened purely by chance, but I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that it did because, I'm with two other coaches and we're each in our own stages of development and growth, but really being able to stay in touch and seeing how each one of us is progressing, and then we shared the good and the bad, and we've been going for over 2 years now, I think. So, we ended up sharing personal because inevitably you get to personal life as you share, but that's been really, really helpful for me to stay kind of on track and get feedback from people who I know will be honest
Yeah.
and will
Yeah. And
give me
having
that what I need to hear.
Yes, having somebody that understands, even if it's just like a small group, someone that can understand like and feel things similar to the way that you do because they're in something similar, that is a necessity. That is
Yeah,
and it can feel really and I think that's maybe why the early days feel so lonely, is because it takes a while to find that. And
right.
then once you find that, you're so much stronger because of it.
Right. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Well, you've shared a lot, but before we wrap up today, I do want to ask, is there anything else, any tips, suggestions, advice, anything else that you would like to share for those who are maybe thinking about starting the business or have started, but kind of are still iffy about things?
Yeah,
Anything that you'd like to share? There
I would
doesn't
say,
have to be, but
yeah. I guess, one of the things that I wish somebody would have said to me, or I wish I would have read this when I was thinking about quitting my corporate job, is if you are thinking about it, like if you're, I guess, if you're scared of it, right, that means you're thinking about it. And if you're
mm,
thinking about it, that means that you should consider pulling the trigger. Like if you are sitting there on somebody else's payroll and you're constantly thinking about what it might be like to start your own thing, that's your sign. Nobody is gonna like come and tap you on the shoulder and say like, "Hey, it's your time to start the thing." That action comes from you.
right.
And you have to take that action. You have to move from that place from like I'm a dreamer to like I'm a doer. I'm going to do that thing. It's super uncomfortable, but nobody's coming for you to tell you that like now is the time. You have to make that jump. And if you're looking for the sign, it's because you're thinking about it. And it might be because you're
Mm.
afraid of it.
I love that. Thank you so, yes, I think you're absolutely right. Thinking back my journey, I can definitely see the signs. So,
Yeah.
so I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Megan, you did mention briefly at the beginning what you guys do, but how can people find you if somebody wants to work with you or just connect with you? Where can people find you?
Yeah. Well, our email, or excuse me, Our website is formadasocial.com, Formada
Yeah,
social.com.
we'll share all the links so you can just go through, but we'll share everything in the description so that people can just click and go.
Yeah, and I'm the person, that like I mentioned, we're a small team. So I do discovery calls with people all day, just like this. Like this is my job to meet with people, learn more about their business. We're not, high pressure sales. Like we do a call just like this. We usually like learn like do we like each other? Like is there a
Mm.
solid foundation for building a client agency relationship? I like to ask a lot of questions about if you were to work with an agency and something really great happens, what is that? And then we just work backwards from there. So,
Oh, that's like
contacting me through our website and scheduling just like a no obligation discovery call is the best way to get started and to learn like, yeah, should we work together or are we maybe not the right fit?
sounds great. And I love that you guys are you're going with a positive. So I love the question that you just shared. That sounds awesome. Well, Megan, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing. I feel like there's so much more that I want to ask you, but I know I don't want us to go too long because I want to give people a chance to, get to know you and maybe we do another round,
That would
rather
be
than
fun.
just having
Yeah. I
having a
like
long
talking to you.
conversation. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. For those of you who are watching, you know the drill. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe, you like it, so that we can bring more people like Megan. We can bring more topics like this to you. Again, Megan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. See you around. Bye.